Over 1,000 Formula 1 World Championship races have been held over the past 70 plus years, and there have been some remarkable race finishes. But some of them go beyond that, and are firmly in the territory of the extraordinary. We've picked out some of the weirdest, most spectacular and bizarre race finishes in Formula 1 history to explain why they happened and what made them so amazing. Let us know in the comments what your favourite finish is and what you think of our selection. Lewis Hamilton had victory at Silverstone in the bag, or so it seemed at the start of the final lap of the 2020 British Grand Prix. But as he approached Brooklands, his front left tyre failed and left him three-wheeling it to the finish. With 3.8 kilometres of the lap left to go and Red Bull driver Max Verstappen closing rapidly, having made a precautionary pit stop to change tyres, Hamilton pushed on as hard as he dared. At Copse, he still managed to get through the corner without dropping below 100 km per hour. At Beckett's, it was 125 km per hour and at Stowe, 135. He then attacked the final left-right at Club aggressively, only 15 km per hour slower than on the lap before, to ensure he stayed out of reach of Verstappen. Hamilton, who wasn't the only driver to hit tyre trouble with teammate Valtteri Bottas and McLaren's Carlos Sainz also suffering, made it to the checkered flag to win with just under 6 seconds to spare. When Lotus driver Jarno Trulli dived up the inside of Karun Chandhok's HRT in a bid to take 13th place in the 2010 Monaco Grand Prix, ending up on top of it, it was clear the race was going to end under the safety car. But given finishes under the safety car don't make for good photos, F1 had introduced a rule allowing the safety car to peel into the pits on the last lap, with the cars taking the checkered flag without overtaking. But at the last corner, Michael Schumacher dived up the inside of Fernando Alonso to grab 5th place. But this manoeuvre did appear to be legal given the green flags were showing and the usual rules, allowing overtaking once cars had crossed the safety car line, seemed to apply. Mercedes unsuccessfully argued it was legal on the grounds that the yellow flags and safety car boards had been removed, but Schumacher was hit with a 20-second penalty that relegated him to 12th place anyway. Mercedes decided that it was in the best interests of the sport not to appeal, so the penalty stood. Even so, the FIA did admit that there was a lack of clarity in the regulations and modified the wording to ensure this confusion did not happen again. Ferrari's 8th 1-2 finish of 2002 came in an unexpected order in the United States Grand Prix at Indianapolis. Michael Schumacher had controlled the pace ahead of Rubens Barrichello, but as the pair came through the banking and headed to the line side by side, Barrichello ended up finishing 11 thousandths of a second ahead. The pair subsequently suggested it had been an impromptu attempt at a dead heat, which would have been a remarkable achievement given the timing went to 3 decimal places. It was a confused finish, and there were also suggestions that Schumacher had deliberately handed the win to Barrichello to pay him back for the controversial finish of the Austrian Grand Prix earlier that season. There, Barrichello had backed off coming through the last corner to obey a team order to let Schumacher win, which led to the introduction of a ban on team orders. But it also might simply have been a botched photo finish, with Schumacher dropping fractionally below Barrichello by accident. The most spectacularly destructive conclusion to a battle for 7th place in F1 history happened at Monza in 1993, with Minardi teammates Pierluigi Martini and Christian Fittipaldi colliding a few metres short of the line. Martini was struggling in the closing stages, having lost 5th gear, and Fittipaldi had cut a 25-second deficit to nothing in the last 8 laps. He pulled to the right of Martini on the approach to the line. Martini inched right in an attempt to cover him. And depending on who you believe, this either combined with what Martini claimed was losing momentum as he shifted from 4th to 6th, and Fittipaldi argued was his teammate lifting to cause the collision. As a result, Fittipaldi's Minardi was launched skywards and completed a near 360-degree backflip before landing on its wheels, although the front right was torn off on landing, and he crossed the line in 8th place. The 1982 Monaco Grand Prix was the race nobody wanted to win. Alain Prost seemed set to triumph, only to crash exiting the chicane with 2 laps remaining. This handed Riccardo Patrese the lead, but he spun at the hairpin with a lap and a half to go. Didier Pironi then picked up the lead, but he was running out of fuel and stopped in the tunnel on the last lap. So Andrea de Cesaris was going to take the lead, but his Alfa Romeo stopped with no fuel at Casino Square. Remarkably, this left the way clear for Patrese, who had managed to bump start his Brabham with assistance from the marshals and started the last lap behind de Cesaris and Pironi. It was Patrese's first Grand Prix win. But what of Derek Daly, you ask? Thanks to the confusion, it's often said the Williams driver would have won before his rear wingless Williams ground to a halt out of oil approaching Rascasse, but he was never in a position to do so. He was a lap behind Patrese, so was never running ahead of him. Despite not taking the checkered flag, Pironi and de Cesaris were classified second and third, with Daly down in sixth. The conclusion to the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix is unique on this list, given it produced a bizarre and unsatisfactory finish to a race that never really started. With continuous rain engulfing the circuit, the race was never going to start at the scheduled time of 3 p.m, but after a series of incremental delays, the cars did head out for formation laps behind the safety car 25 minutes late. After just 2 laps, the red flags flew and the cars didn't get going again for almost another 3 hours. And when they did, they completed 2 laps under the safety car before the red flag was displayed, with the pack completing that 3rd lap when they returned to the pits. As the cars had completed 3 laps, that satisfied the rule demanding more than 2 laps must be done to constitute a race. On that basis, the race was declared over and half points awarded, with Max Verstappen winning ahead of George Russell. To add to the absurdity, the countback system meant that the race result was declared after just 1 lap. With 4 laps remaining of the 1985 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, Ayrton Senna was seemingly on his way to victory for Team Lotus. But the pace of the race had been frenetic and caused fuel consumption problems, with Senna slowing on lap 57 and being passed for the lead by Stefan Johansson, who looked set for a famous victory on what was only his 2nd start for Ferrari. But then Johansson too ran dry, handing the lead to Alain Prost. Prost made it to the checkered flag first, but even he was on the limit, as on the slowdown lap, he too ground to a halt. Elio De Angelis came through in 2nd place, with Thierry Boutsen grinding to a halt, having, you guessed it, run out of fuel just short of the line. Fortunately, he was able to push his car across the line to take the checkered flag, hanging on to 3rd by just 3 seconds from Patrick Tambay. Astonishingly, there was more drama to come, and Prost was later disqualified after his car was found to be 2 kilos underweight. This handed victory to De Angelis, with Boutsen taking 2nd place. When the race's technical expert Gary Anderson, then on the Jordan pit wall, called 8th place Giancarlo Fisichella into the pits under the safety car to take on fuel and tyres at the end of lap 7 of the 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix, it seemed like an odd decision, but it contributed to an extraordinary and drawn-out race finish. The strategy was formulated on the basis that this gave Fisichella the fuel range to get to 75% distance, at which point the race might be stopped and full points awarded. And it worked, as shortly after Fisichella took the lead when Kimi Raikkonen ran wide, Mark Webber had an enormous crash, with Fernando Alonso collecting the debris. The race was stopped, and the Jordan team were convinced they'd won, only for victory to be given to Raikkonen on count back to lap 53. But the Jordan team were right. It turned out Fisichella had completed his 55th lap a few seconds before the red flag, meaning the countback should have been made to lap 54. This was done automatically, but an error led to the timing also being rolled back a lap manually on top of that, and a result based on lap 53 when Raikkonen led. The correct result, based on Fisichella's first lap in the lead, was eventually declared after 6 days. Sebastian Vettel was baffled to see the checkered flag marking his victory in the 2018 Canadian Grand Prix at the end of lap 69 of a 70-lap race. Initially, it seemed this was the result of an error by celebrity checkered flag waver model Winnie Harlow. This led to yours truly asking the top 3 finishers in the post-race press conference if amateurs should be allowed to wave the checkered flag. But it turned out she was misdirected to wave the checkered flag by local officials who had misunderstood the lap count on the screen. The checkered flag was treated like a red flag, so the results were declared based on the finishing order on lap 68, and it made no difference to the finishing order. At the following year's Canadian Grand Prix, Vettel also caused some post-race befuddlement. Frustrated at the 5-second penalty for rejoining unsafely that cost him victory to Lewis Hamilton despite winning on the road, he made a point of swapping the P2 parking space sign for P1 in front of his Ferrari in Parc Fermé. Given Michael Schumacher was given a late 10-second penalty to serve in the 1998 British Grand Prix, Mika Häkkinen looked set to win the race. But Schumacher pulled into the pits to serve the penalty on the final lap, crossing the finish line in the process and winning the race. Cue inevitable uproar. The penalty was issued for lapping the Benetton of Alex Wurz on lap 43 after passing a static yellow flag. This was a slam dunk in terms of the penalty, but a series of procedural mistakes meant that Schumacher never paid the price. Chief among them was the fact that Ferrari was not notified of the penalty within the mandated 25 minutes, which rendered the question of whether the penalty had been served properly moot, as it was rescinded anyway. There were also legitimate questions about whether it was a post-race time penalty or a stop-go penalty, given the lack of clarity from the stewards. McLaren unsurprisingly objected, and it went to the International Court of Appeal. They called for Schumacher either to be disqualified or relegated to second behind Häkkinen, but the result stood, and ultimately the blame for the farrago was pointed squarely at the stewards. So those are our 10 choices for F1's weirdest finishes, but what have we missed out? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed our look back at these bizarre stories, make sure you like and subscribe.